Hello, hello, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Harry Hubble, and welcome to episode 12 of AKA Sports. And with me, finally this week, after getting some technical difficulties figured out, I've got my man with me, Mr. Fletch. Fletch, I'm glad that you survived the internet apocalypse that you had issues over there with. Hopefully, you had a good weekend. Was there anything unusual this weekend that you saw in the world of sports that maybe you want to talk about?
Yeah, man, I'm glad to be back. Glad to be back. You know how the internet goes. It works when it wants to. Not in particular this week. It was entertaining. We got a lot going on with basketball getting started. We got baseball deeper into the playoffs now. A
Yes.
little bit of college football, some pro football. It's a lot going on. We had a big fight, not this past weekend, but the weekend prior. Yeah, man, a lot of stuff going on, but nothing weird. What you got going on this week, man?
I did find an article today. I really was going to actually bring up the fight right here and now, but I'm going to save that because I saw this
Okay.
very interesting article on ESPN that maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't. It's talking about Barcelona's Pedri, if you know who that is. He's a soccer player. They just signed him to a deal that included a club record. Let me get this right. 1.5 billion, that's a B, billion-dollar release clause in the contract.
Wow.
Now, do you know what a release clause is? Because I didn't know. I had to look it up.
No, fill me in. Fill me in.
So over in soccer land, obviously we saw this happen with some of the more notable names. Cristiano Ronaldo when he went to Yentes or Gent or Yon or
Juventus, I got you.
yeah, got me exactly. Basically, there's a release clause. So basically, what happens is each one of these players can typically be signed by another club at any given time, unlike in baseball where they have to have a contract and all that fun jazz. But they can be
Right.
signed by any other club at any time. However, they have to meet the release clause amount. So, if
Hmm.
another club wants to sign Mr. Pedri from Barcelona, they're going to have to shell out $1.5 billion dollars in order for that to happen. Which typically, based on the article that I read, most of these release clauses are up in the stratosphere of numbers because obviously they don't want any other club to actually sign these players. But
Right.
it's just insane. $1.5 billion dollars. If you want his services, you can pay that much to bring him over to your club. So, yes, that was the more interesting article that I've seen this
Wow.
week. Crazy. Crazy
That's
town.
very crazy. That's a lot of cash. That's a lot. Is that 1.5 billion? Is that US dollars?
That is correct. So,
Okay.
1.5, it would be 1 billion even in euros, but 1.5
Exactly.
billion in US dollars, which again, insane. Just
Still insane. Odds are when you reach Barcelona, that's like the pinnacle of soccer. If you make it to that club, you're probably not going anywhere else unless your name is Messi or Neymar, and you know those guys are like the face of the sport. That's a little different. I don't know who this Pedri cat is, so I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Maybe it's another young legend in the making. We don't know. I guess we'll
he
find out soon, huh, Clark?
He is. In that article, he's 19 years old, and he had a
Okay.
tremendous early month or first 6 months of his career based on that article. So he seems like maybe the next up and coming superstar. And I mean, they put $1 billion on him, so why not?
Exactly.
So we will see how that shakes out. And like you mentioned, we have quite a bit to get to today. Let's go ahead and first let everybody know if you're watching on YouTube, thank you very much. If you're listening to us on the podcast, there are other ways to listen to us as well. Just simply go to anchor.fm/aka sports or simply follow us on facebook.com/aka sports FB. So let's go ahead and dig into the news and notes. And the first big piece of news that came out on Monday night during the Monday Night Football game was the then Raiders head coach John Gruden. More emails came out the week before. There was an email that came out, and it was talking about NFLPA Executive Director DeMaurice Smith. Uh, Not the greatest light, I will say. John Gruden stated some things that are I will not restate because it's just unnecessary, and everybody's seen it at this point. Um, but he was allowed to apologize for it. He stayed with the team he shouldn't have, in all seriousness, and he shouldn't have been allowed to coach on Sunday, but that's my 2 cents. But during the Monday Night Football game, it was announced that he was allowed to resign from the LA Raiders after more and more emails come out, which, Fletch, I could be wrong. But I think number one, he should have been fired on the spot for the first emails that come out. Number
Yep,
two, all the emails should have came out at the very beginning just to make sure that this didn't drag along. So what it seemed to me was whoever was leaking this information was trying to give the organization a chance to make the right decision, and then when they
exactly.
didn't, they let the rest go out. Is that kind of what you're feeling as well?
Now, I love how you said it. You spoke that very well, Clark. I think that's exactly what happened. I do think that the NFL gave the Vegas Raiders a chance to basically take care of it, and they didn't. They left their mess on the floor. Also, to a statement came out from the owner of the Ravens, Mr. Davis, there, and mentioned that it's in the NFL's hands or something along those lines, and really just didn't take any ownership of the issue. Didn't discipline, didn't fire, did nothing essentially, and just sat back and said, "Hey, NFL, you take care of it." It kind of goes to his character. There's a lot to unpack here. To be honest with you, if we really want to dive into it, I think we can. I agree. He should have been fired or at least reprimanded, suspended, fined, something for the first statement. Maybe not fined, but I think you could have at least suspended him for a game due to some type of, I don't know, was that conduct detrimental? I don't know, something. But the fact that we had to wait for these other emails to come out to find out, and I hate to say this, what type of human John Gruden has portrayed to be over the last decade at this point. I'm just going to say that because, I mean, what was it, 7 years worth of emails? We don't know how many emails, how many things were said, how many text messages even were sent along these lines, right? So the fact that the emails are probably just the surface of it, of letting us know who he is, or at least what he was doing. Maybe not who he is, because people make mistakes, but there's the pattern here, and whether that be various different groups, whether it be the LGBT community, whether it be the Black community, um, a lot of offending was done, and a lot of things can are not going to be forgotten. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I think the right thing was done as far as him not being in the league anymore. I do think he should have actually been fired though, and probably after the first email, I would have at least suspended him, if not fired him. And after this came out, I would have just fired him. And it wouldn't have been a resigning or parting. None of that. None of that. He's fired. So you know, that's how I take it, Clark. I'm not sure, necessarily what's next for the Raiders. Kind of sucks for them because they were looking like they're on the up and up as a franchise, and especially this season. It's just, yeah. I would. I'm gonna stop there because I don't want to say too much, just because it's a lot to unpack and there's a lot that we can rant about on this one. But I will say I'm glad that he's no longer in the league. That there's no place for that.
Yeah, and especially for a league that over the last year or so has been trying to uh, put all these sayings on the field and the helmets and trying to
Yeah,
push out all this crap that shouldn't be there. For this to be there, number one, it's a true black eye, and ironically, that's exactly what their logo is on the NFL itself. And like you said, there's no place for it. Gruden, you're gone. Move on.
yeah,
Hopefully they can find somebody else. And really, the owner, Mark Davis, really needs to look at himself because this was an organization that was the first to hire an African American coach. They were the first to hire I believe it was a female.
yeah.
A female
Assistant.
vice assistant coach or something
Yeah,
along those lines. So his father, Al Davis, was pushing for a lot of good changes in the NFL. So unfortunately, and hopefully he can learn from this, but based on how he handled the situation, it doesn't look good at this point, but hopefully they'll be able to find a good coach moving forward. This team has got some good pieces.
hmm
We'll see how they respond to it. Staying with that same line of thought, unfortunately, the Washington football team. At this point, I think the NFLPA is asked the NFL to release all of the emails stemming from the Washington football teams, the organization's uh,
yep.
dealings with and how they handled cheerleaders and how they handled the organization as a whole. Be very interesting to see what the NFL does in that situation. I know even Derek Carr had asked the NFL to basically put all the email conversations from every single team out there. Uh, Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, and if I had to guess, there's probably a few emails out there that don't want to see the light of day.
No.
But at this point, we'll see. We'll keep tabs on if that plea with the NFL is figured out. With the NFLPA trying to get more information put out into the public eye. But let's finish on a good note here. The Washington football team actually did announce that they are going to retire Sean Taylor's number 21, something that I think you and I both agree should have been done years ago at this point. He was a tremendous player, unfortunately, was killed way, way too young. Uh, Easily been a Hall of Famer in my book. He was a phenomenal player, one of the hardest hitting. I think he was a safety, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he was one of the best to do it. So I'm glad to see they are um, retiring his number. And one other really good thing, I'll give a two golf claps to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're removing John Gruden's name from their Ring of Honor as well. So
Yep.
kudos to them doing the right thing. Uh,
And quickly.
yes, yeah, very quickly. We'll see if other teams react in certain ways. I know there was a post about a certain someone on the Buffalo Bills Ring of Honor that may or may not be removed. It's been quite a while, but we'll see what happens there. Do you know who that is?
Don't fill me in.
It was a famous running back in the day. And at one point, he drove a Ford Bronco really slowly in a police chase.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, he's in the Ring of Honor. So we'll see. I think they haven't done anything. I don't know if there's a big push for it, but in today's society, who knows? We'll see what happens. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Today's society does have a role in this. Again, we don't want to open up too many cans of worms here, but I am glad that they are retiring Sean Taylor's jersey. That is a
Yes.
well received accomplishment. I'm sure the Taylor family will be proud, to say the least. I do think it's long. It's been too long, but at the same time, we're glad it's happening. Kind of just goes back to the Washington organization, if you will, along with the email attachments. Well, you know what, Clark? I think we might need to deep dive into this at some point in time in our future, but yeah, there's a lot to unpack that I think we both may want to, but this is too much to
Hmm.
unpack, I think. But yeah, it's shout out to Sean Taylor. We'll end on that note, right?
Yes, yes. Shout out to the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Sean Taylor.
Absolutely.
So let's move on. Fletch, I will be giving you the floor. Obviously, we had a big fight this past weekend that you were going to talk more about last week until you had your internet
Yes.
apocalypse. So tell us what you thought of the fight, and we'll go from there.
So I'm gonna just give it to the people blunt, Clark. This was the best fight I've personally ever seen.
Wow.
I've been on this earth 30 some odd years, and I never seen a better fight. I'll just be completely honest. I've seen a lot of good fights. I've seen a lot of Mayweather fights. I've seen a lot of Pacquiao fights. I saw a lot of Roy Jones Jr. towards the end of his career as a kid. Just these are just guys I grew up on. Those tend to be the names that stand out the most in the sport over the last 15 to 20 years. Um, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury also being added to that list. Um, the reason why I say this is the best fight I've ever seen is from beginning to end. There were, first of all, not even from beginning to end, from before the fight, you had the first two fights that set this up, which you could say Fury won the first one. Some people believe it should have been a draw, as it was called on the first one. I was okay with it being a draw. I don't think there was anything egregious there. The second fight, Fury handled his business. Let's just say that. Handled his business, knocked him out, and that's what led us to the third fight. And I told everybody this: if Wilder wins, there has to be a fourth. But something tells me that there won't be a fourth because Tyson Fury is just too good, and he proved that much. He's just too good. I think Deontay Wilder gave him everything he had. And I honestly believe Tyson Fury also gave Wilder back everything that he had too. Knockouts happened fast and quick. Wilder went down in the third, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, this fight is over." He gets back up, and Clark, man, off of pure fumes alone, I feel like instinct, no technique. I'm not saying Fury has a. I mean, Wilder has a lot of technique, anyways. No knock on him. It's just not him. He's a hell of a knockout puncher. He's a power puncher. In that right hand, I'll just be completely honest. It may kill men. It very well may. That's how hard he hits. When he was running off fumes and knocked out Fury twice in the fourth round, I completely lost it. I thought the fight was over. I picked Fury. I think you did too, right, Clark?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we both had Fury winning the fight, and I most did. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure people that bet on that fight and bet on Fury were shaking in their boots in round four. When I saw Fury hit the mat the first time, I'm like, okay, that was payback. When I saw him hit the mat the second time, I was like, okay, this might be over very quickly. And I was surprised that he got back up as easily as he did. And then after that, man, we saw two guys equilibrium off, fighting off pure heart and instinct and just skill and talent. Not a lot of technique. Again, not being super planned and precise. It was literally a slugfest. And at times, I ain't gonna lie to you, just being a normal bodied human being and not a 6'9", 250 plus pound person, I personally was very concerned for the well being of both of these two gentlemen as they got it on in the ring. And I think Fury put Wilder out of his misery in the 11th. After the knockdown in the 10th, everybody kind of sensed the end might be closing in here. The card had Fury winning on all three cards, and then he put him down with the devastating right hand there in the 11th round, man. And I'll be honest, I've never seen a man knocked out so cold in a while. I didn't even see him move until they showed him sitting in the chair after the fight was over, talking about Wilder. So, hell of a fight, man. 5 knockouts total, ended with a TKO. I'm glad the ref called it like he did. And then he give Fury a chance, or Wilder a chance to get up and do the count. It was when we saw him hit the mat, everyone knew the fight was over. But it was a great fight. The two put on a show. I think Wilder has nothing to hold to put his head down about. I do believe he's the second best fighter at least in that division, if not the world. And I think he should honestly, if I was him, after seeing that fight, you have nothing left to prove. Neither one of you gentlemen do. And I'd be honest, and I'm not gonna say I'm shocked if this is their last fight, but if it was me and I was either one of these guys, I may hang it up.
Yeah, and from all accounts, from what I've read around the world of sports, it was definitely one of the greater fights that have happened in quite some time, if ever. I
Yes.
watched the last couple rounds on TV as well, and yeah, you definitely that punch out happened, it was you just knew
Yeah.
at that moment, like okay, yeah, but you can definitely tell even the start of that round that both of those fighters have been giving it their all.
Oh
It
yeah.
was just to the point where eventually someone was going to crack, and it was just Wilder's time to hit the mat. So
Yep.
definitely one of the better fights. I know we've got another big fight coming up a little bit later, so I want to keep an eye on that one. For this one, definitely
Yes.
one of the better fights, and just like you mentioned, no one's really got anything else to really prove at this point, but I'm sure people would love to see them back in the ring. But
Yeah. Be a big payday too. The only thing I will say, the only thing holding us up is what is it? What's the guy's name? Usyk and Joshua, Anthony Joshua. Usyk just beat Anthony Joshua, which was an upset. Joshua was supposed to fight Fury until the Wilder Fury 3 was announced. And now we were expecting to see a Joshua Fury fight for the title because some people do believe Joshua may be able to beat Fury. I think after seeing Fury for the third time against Wilder, I beg to differ extremely strongly. And let's add to the fact that Joshua just lost to somebody that most don't know. Um, so it's that the heavyweight division is starting to become a little bit of a cluster, a powder keg, if you will. It'll be something to watch for the future moving forward. We do have some big fights coming up in other divisions, but it is something at least to keep an eye out for in the heavyweight division on how things are going to shake moving forward. So, any boxing fans or fighting fans in general, I'm sure, if you're anything like me, you're excited at least for what's next for the heavyweight division, and just seeing how things are going to unfold after these two had their instant classic.
And lastly, just to button this up, Fury has taught all of us that you don't need a beach bod in order to be a world champion.
No,
So
you don't.
you just have to punch really, really hard.
And take a punch.
And take a punch as well. You're not wrong. Let's go ahead and move on, Fletch. I will give you the floor. The NBA has started their preseason games. I think they're 5 or 6 games into it this or so far. Um, what are you seeing so far, not only in the preseason, but other
Yeah.
news that's noteworthy at this point?
Yeah, man. I'm happy. It's this is what I call is like the I don't know, the eclipse of sports. The reason why I say that is because soccer is obviously in full swing for all of our soccer fans, whether that be overseas or here in the States. Baseball is into the depth of their playoffs now with the ALCS, locked in and ready to go tomorrow, Friday, and then also you have the NL Game Five is going to happen right after or sometime tonight after our recording. By the time this is published and posted live, the winner of that, will be over with. Football season is in full swing, and then here we come with basketball to kind of. Oh, and I'm sorry, I left it out. Hockey's opening night started, I believe it was Tuesday or yesterday, possibly. I believe. I think I saw Charles Barkley on TV with Wayne Gretzky. That's something to
Past
watch.
Tuesday is when they started.
Tuesday. Okay, appreciate it. And it's just it's a good time, man. It's a good time. It's the best time of year for me, in my opinion, for sports because everything is in gear now. So to dive into this here, we have a little bit of I guess news and notes technically about basketball. The big storylines to start the season are Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving. Clark, we've mentioned Ben Simmons quite a few times here on the podcast. As far as just since the playoffs, the things that have been said, and then the possible trades that can happen, and the rumors of these trades. We heard about the Warriors, we've heard about the Kings, we've heard about the Blazers, and now we're starting to hear about the Nets with Kyrie Irving involved. So I just want to mention that Ben Simmons has reported to camp. Doc Rivers believes that he will be playing this season. I don't know if he'll play opening night, but if he doesn't play opening night, I'm sure he'll play during at least the first 1 or 2 weeks of the season. So you're probably going to get a Ben Simmons in the Philly jersey at least one more chance, or one more time at least before the trade deadline at least. So that could last all season. We just don't know. We have to see how that plays out. He'll play. Ben Simmons has not given anyone a reason recently on why he won't play. Also, too, I think money's involved. I know that the Sixers owed him, I think it was like $8.5 million, and he wasn't going to get that unless he reported to camp. And now he's here, and they got to pay him. It's kind of a little bit of a situation, and also too, kind of leading to a little bit of the NBA looking into some rule changes as well, along with the Kyrie Irving and the vaccination situation. So I want to kind of take a deep breath here because the headache that is Kyrie Irving has now reared its head yet again. I love Kyrie Irving. I'll be honest with you, Clark. I really do. I love him as a person because I think he's a smart individual. I think he does stand for something, and also love him as a basketball player because I mean, hell, he's a champion and he's a hell of a lot of fun to watch when he gets going. The problem is this: is that, and I'm echoing a little bit what Stephen A. mentioned, and not just because of Stephen A. Smith and we know him. It's because of what he said and the things that I do agree with. You have a contract. Your contract with the Brooklyn Nets had you playing basketball for X amount of years for X amount of dollars. You also were the first star to sign with the Brooklyn Nets as of lately, and you had a hand in bringing in two future Hall of Fame players in Kevin Durant and also James Harden. Not only that, you also kind of changed the landscape of the Brooklyn Nets because when you arrived on the team was actually a very deep team that had a playoff berth with the help of All Star that season in D'Angelo Russell. You had a very deep team with Karis LeVert and Spencer Dinwiddie, along with the other guys that are on that squad as well. So when you came in and kind of I wouldn't say throw a wrench in the plans, but you kind of, changed the dynamic of that franchise, and created somewhat of a super team or a super team. I'm not going to say somewhat. You made a super team. And now it looks like you're just abandoning them to be a voice of the voiceless, yet we haven't heard you actually speak, sir. How are you going to be a voice for the voiceless when you're not using your voice? And what exactly are we protesting or an outrage about? the NFL, as we all know, is over 90% vaccinated. Probably at this point over 95% vaccinated, and the NBA is on the same pace as well. I believe they're over 90% with most players being vaccinated, and a lot of players publicly coming out and saying, I did this for the well-being of my family and also for the sport. LeBron James is one that I mentioned, who's obviously still the face of basketball. So it says a lot to me about the actions of Kyrie Irving in this regard. I think it is selfish. I do think he should get vaccinated and play. You can't be all half in and half out, and that's the reason why the Nets decided, hey, well, if you're not going to be vaccinated, therefore you can't play in the state of New York, where 41 plus of our games are, because our home gym is here in Brooklyn. I mean, how are we going to be able to let you play on the road as well? We still got to play the Knicks, who are in this state. Other states also have issues as well. So you're basically talking about Kyrie Irving not getting vaccinated and therefore not playing half the season, and then possibly missing very, very important playoff games when the time comes as well. So, I mean, for him, man, I think he should make his mind up. There's been a lot of issues just over the past few years. He sat out a lot last year, not because of injury, but due to personal reasons. Um, this to me is another personal reason. And there's just a lot of personal reasons. I'll be honest, Clark, if I had had a lot of personal reasons and took off work this much, I don't think I personally would be employed by my employer currently. So that's just something I want to throw out there. I don't want to devalue or degrade Kyrie Irving or his beliefs in any way, but I do think this is somewhat selfish, and I'm not necessarily a fan of it. But those are the two big storylines coming into the season. Did you have any thoughts on the Ben Simmons or the Kyrie Irving sagas, if you will?
I will say with the Ben Simmons one, it was surprising that he did report because there was a
It
lot of
was.
talk about his teammates trying to go back out to his home, and he told them just to stay away. He didn't want to talk to them, so the arrow was definitely pointing towards him not wanting to report. And all of a sudden, he kind of shows up and kind of caught people by surprise.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward now. Imagine he's all in, but not
Hmm.
that long ago he was all out. So
Right.
we'll see what happens there. And then as for the Kyrie Irving, again, uh, yeah, pick a side, stay on that side. It's kind of a you're putting the organization in a tough bind just because they have to play by other people's rules and regulations. It's just the nature of the
Everyone does
beast.
right now.
Right,
Hmm.
exactly. So we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, I mean the Nets at this point have to have Plan A with him and Plan B without him, and
Yep.
it's going to put them in a little bit of a bind. So we'll see how that plays out. And before we move on from the NBA, I know you mentioned off air that you wanted to potentially throw out some picks for Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
What were those picks of yours?
Yes, sir. So we got a few things, man. I kind of just want to dive into the NBA kind of briefly. We kind of all, I mean, the NBA season is so long, so it seems like it was just yesterday we were talking about the NBA Finals. But I mean, here we are. Opening season starts October 19th. I believe the first games are typically on TNT for anybody at home watching. Tune in. I think opening night is Bucks, Nets, Lakers, Warriors, if I'm not mistaken. Very good doubleheader to start the season off with the TNT crew, which is probably everybody's favorite. In addition to that, we'll kind of talk about a few things here. First and foremost, I want to give some award predictions out. Some preseason award predictions. We'll see if I'm right come April or May here when they roll these out. However, we'll kind of start off with the MVP award. I think this year, and this is partially due to the fact that I don't know if Kyrie Irving will play, but I'm going to give my MVP to Kevin Durant this year. Something about it this year just says this is Kevin Durant's year of it's almost like a takeover year for him. And I mean the entire 2021 year, not so much this season. If you remember last year, he was probably the most impressive basketball player in the world when healthy from last season. He was a toe away from going to the conference finals and advancing past the champions, the eventual champion, Milwaukee Bucks. Had a great series. And then coming into this year, not saying they're shorthanded because you still got James Harden and company, but at the same time, you don't have Kyrie anymore. You're not sure when you're going to get him back. Somebody has to shoulder the load. What we saw in the Olympics was a complete Kevin Durant, by the way, who played amazing every single game, I felt like. And I think he's now the leader in points for USA basketball history. And, just coming off the injuries, man, I mean, I don't think we've seen anybody come off the Achilles and play this well. Kobe averaged like 27 off the Achilles, but it was a more of an inefficient 27, unfortunately, for the late great Kobe Bryant. In this case, Kevin Durant was just as efficient as efficient as he's always been. So for that reason, man, he's my MVP. I do think Luka Doncic has a lot to say about it coming up this year. Nikola Jokic, the reigning MVP, does as well. And then also too, I believe that you could possibly see somebody out of the Bucks again, like Giannis winning MVP, or somebody from the Clippers like Kawhi or Paul George winning MVP as well. I think this year you'll see a lot of great teams really vie for that top spot with the full training camp now. The offseason wasn't shortened like it was last year. They're playing in their home gyms. The fans are there. It's kind of getting back to what we know. So that's what he's my MVP. My rookie of the year, Clark. I'm making a change. If everybody's remember, I had Cade Cunningham as my rookie of the year pick. I'm going Jalen Green now. I've seen enough.
Hey, nothing
I just
wrong with that.
Yeah, man. I kind of watched a little bit of preseason. He seems like a seasoned pro out there at times. I'm rolling with Jalen Green, man. I think he fills it up this year. I think you'll see 20 plus points a game from him, if not close to that. I think he'll have a hell of a rookie season. I think Kate Cunningham will too, but something about this Jalen Green kid, it screams professional to me already. Um, Coach of the year, I'm going with Eric Spoelstra this time. I think the addition of Kyle Lowry will help boost this team, but I think Spoelstra is going to do a hell of a job really helping these guys out. And instead of just really showing up in the playoffs and all this nonsense of, the how they played in the regular season last year, and say Tyler Hero not being well, and you're not having really, really much cohesiveness throughout the season with a lot of injuries and COVID. Again, nonsense, as I like to say. I don't think it was anyone to blame in Miami, but I think it was a hangover from the NBA Finals the year before in the bubble. I think this year they right the ship. I think Coach Spoelstra has a hell of a lot to do with it. I think he'll have his guys ready and prepared to play. You'll have big seasons as usual out of Jimmy Butler. I think Bam will take another step as well. Bam Adebayo. But I think Kyle Lowry's addition along with Eric Spoelstra really, putting his stamp on this team again. And I think they'll have a hell of a season. I think they'll surprise some people with how good they'll be this year and in the running for the title, at least the Eastern Conference title, I believe. And last but not least, because I'm not going to get into six man of the year and most improved, I think that's really something to kind of talk about as the season progresses. It's really no way to predict that fairly, and I don't want to sit here and do so. But I think defensive player of the year is something we can kind of talk about, and that's the last award that I'm going to predict. I'm going to roll with Draymond Green. Draymond Green kind of gets a little slighted on the defensive side of things. I don't know if it's because he plays for one of the best offenses in basketball history. I don't know if it's because we see Rudy Gobert blocking an enormous amount of shots. But Draymond Green changes how you approach the game. Rudy Gobert has weaknesses on defense. Ben Simmons has weaknesses on defense. These are the other two finalists from last year. Draymond Green, I'm just gonna be frank. I don't think he really has a weakness on defense. There are some things he may do better on the defensive side of things than other things, but overall, there's no weaknesses in teams. Half the game plan around that, and I think with the addition of Klay Thompson coming back this year, along with the team having another year to build more chemistry with a lot of these young guys, I think that's going to say a lot with what Golden State does this year and getting back to being not only a great offensive team, but a great defensive team. When people forget how good Klay Thompson is on the defensive side of the ball, that's not going to do anything but help. Because Giannis, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid, and who's the other guy? Rudy Gobert. They've been in the running for defensive player of the years and have won defensive player of the years, not just because of how great they are defensively, but how great their teams are defensively. And I think Draymond now is going to see possibly another award with having some defensive help back and the team being whole again, if you will. So those are my preseason awards. We've kind of talked about the little bit of the storylines that we have so far with the Ben Simmons and Kyrie Irving situation. Just to kind of go a little bit further into that, you have the Lakers storyline as well with Russell Westbrook and Carmelo Anthony, just some notable names that are now in Tinseltown. You have the Bucks coming back to see if they can claim their title again, or I should say, defend their title. You have the Suns, who some people think are a fraud from last year because they got a lot of injuries along the way from their opponents up until the finals. So people don't think they are as good as what they seemed last year. So you have a lot of good things happening in the league right now, and a lot of teams I think are going to be looking to make that next step and really show how good they are. So I'm excited about this season. I did want to ask you this, Clark. Is there anything this season that you're just excited to see?
Really, at this point, what I'm kind of looking forward to in the NBA is just to see uh, really what the Lakers can do. And I'm not really a big Lakers fan. I grew up being a Chicago Bulls fan myself, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the show. It's the lights. It's LA. You always want to see how well or how badly they can do. Can Anthony Davis play an entire season fully healthy? No,
Mm-hmm.
it probably won't happen. He's going to be injured at some point in time. How much of a load will LeBron have to shoulder yet again? Can other teams rise up yet again and potentially take them down? But I'm
Mm-hmm.
also very interested, and I've always been, for his very short career so far, I've always been excited to watch Luka Doncic play. He's just one of the more exciting players to watch.
For
Like you
sure.
said, he's a potential MVP candidate year in and year out. What he did in the Olympics for a team that never got that far, and what he did with them is
Amazing.
extremely impressive.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that goes along. I did have a couple other news for the NBA. There was a couple of prospects that are going straight to the G League. One such player was a top Chinese prospect. Zhang will go straight to the G League as well. I think there's another one from
Yep.
Australia. So they've seen what Jalen Green did. He went straight to the G League. How much better he's looked compared to college athletes
Mm-hmm.
by going to the G League. This is a trend. We'll see just how many more will follow this path, but
Right.
as of right now, we're definitely seeing some of the higher end prospects go that way. Maybe it's for money, but if they're smart, it's for getting to play with NBA ready players and get just a little bit faster towards the NBA. So we'll
Yep.
see how that affects college basketball. And speaking of college basketball, just a quick note this Friday is Big Blue Nation at 7 p.m., as well as North Carolina's uh, television debut. Not that I'm actually going to play, but it's just kind of an open practice for the media. So it is right
Like a spring
around the
game.
corner. Yeah, it's right around the corner. So we'll keep an eye on that as well. Let's
Facts.
go ahead and move forward to the MLB. Obviously, the preseason or the postseason at this point, we are down to three of the final four teams. We have Boston handling their way through the Yankees and kind of surprising some people by handling the Tampa Bay Rays after losing the first game of the series and winning three straight to move on to the ALCS. And then the Astros handle business against the White Sox, and they will play, I think it's their fifth straight ALCS appearance. So it should be a great series between those two teams. The Braves survived against the Brew Crew. They will be waiting for tonight's game, like you mentioned at 9 o'clock. We'll be having Game 5. What else? I mean, the two best
Let's go.
teams playing in a winner go home scenario. It is a must see TV. Uh, I've got the Giants at home in this one. Who do you have, Fletch?
I got the Dodgers tonight.
Ooh, okay.
I
We
think they pull it off.
We shall see. I would like to see the Giants. I've been a big Buster Posey fan myself. He
Nice.
they have the way they played this year after having a tremendously bad year last year to just destroying all expectations at this point. Would love to see them move on to the Final Four, but we will see what happens, and we will talk about that next week. There are some news and notes in the MLB. One big one is the Cardinals manager actually got let go today after helping the team win 17 straight and basically lock themselves into a postseason bid. He is let go. The organization said it was because of philosophical differences. Uh, sure, yeah, that's fine. We'll see what else you can figure out there, but unfortunately, he is on his way out. Now let's go ahead and before we go into college football for this week, let's thank our wonderful sponsor, Legit Framing. Again, you know you've got stuff that you want framed. You've got a man or woman cave that you want to show off to your friends when they come over and watch the game on that big screen television in the basement that you had set up, and you've got this all decked out. But what about your memorabilia? They don't want to show off going into the closet and just kind of going rack by rack and ooh, looky here, that's fancy. It doesn't even look great. But get it framed, put it on the wall. Great conversation pieces, and Legit Framing is just for you. If you're wanting a free quote, simply go to facebook.com/legitframing or send us an email at legitframing@hotmail.com. Again, a nice wood frame, styrene front, uh, double matted player photos, team photos. We can even put a plaque, maybe your favorite cards in there, your personal photos, whatever it is, we can get it done. Again, if you're looking for a free quote, simply reach out to us either via facebook.com/legitframing or send us an email at legitframing@hotmail.com. Legit Framing, create your next conversation piece. Now, we will get into the wacky world of college football. And
Wacky it is.
this weekend was an absolutely phenomenal weekend for college football. I will say this: I tried my best to stay awake for the entire Alabama Texas A&M game. I actually took about a half an hour nap and woke up just in time to see the last 3 minutes of that game. Which, hey, I saw the ending. Don't
Yep.
judge. But an absolutely phenomenal game. I believe Calzada uh, played his life away. He was a phenomenal play at quarterback. Even when he got hurt, he came back, and every single time he dropped back to pass, and he would look like he was fading away from his throw. It was just perfectly placed. Alabama's defense was exposed in this one. They could not
Yeah.
stop anything. So they have lost, and they are not the number one team in the nation anymore. Now, number one is Georgia, who handled business against Auburn last week. At number two, Iowa won the big game against Penn State, a game that early on it was kind of all Penn State. Sean Clifford was playing a great game, and even though he did have some turnovers here and there, it was a little bit more of a defensive battle, but you could tell that the momentum was always on Penn State's side up until
Hmm.
Sean Clifford got hurt, and unfortunately that happened, and then that's when they just couldn't move the ball at all.
Yep.
Iowa played great defense, did exactly what they needed to do. They got the win. They're moving up to number two. Cincinnati obviously is at number three. They handled business on Friday night against Temple. Oklahoma. Yes, they're number four, but my goodness, they survived another one. I don't know how they do it. This time around, Spencer Rattler did not look good whatsoever in that first half. I believe they were down 28-3 at the half, I believe was the
Hmm.
score. And then they brought in freshman Caleb Williams, and lo and behold, he can play a little bit. He went
A
out
little
there,
bit.
threw for 212 yards, threw a couple touchdowns, along with 86 yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown. He led this team back from just nothing. The entire momentum was on their side the entire second half. Some big runs from the running back as well. They survived in a game that Texas had, and I believe just a little bit of a spoiler alert. Might want to watch out this week because I think they're going to be thinking about what happened and what they had last week. But Oklahoma survives. We'll see what happens there. We'll talk about them here in a minute about that quarterback situation. At number five, Alabama fell to that spot. Ohio State won. They moved up to number six. Penn State fell back to number seven. Michigan jumps up to number eight. Oregon on a bye last week fell back one spot to number nine. And Michigan State, with the BYU loss and their win, moved up to number 10. And Fletch, I want to get your 2 cents on this top 10. Is there anybody in this top 10, maybe positioning within the top 10 or maybe just outside the top 10, that you think should be in or maybe should be rearranged a bit?
Yes, actually, I'm glad you asked. I would take Kentucky over Oregon right now. Um, I think Michigan State, you slot them up to 9, right behind Michigan. You take Oregon, put them at 11. I think Kentucky should be your number 10 team in the nation. Again, I'm probably being picky, but I that's just how I view it. I think Kentucky's playing really good football right now, and I think the win that they had this past week, or really the last 2 weeks, if you kind of look at who they've played, I think says a lot about that team. You beat a Florida team by a touchdown, then you come around and handle business against LSU. I think there's a lot to be said about this Kentucky team. It's not your usual Kentucky football team. We're not used to Big Blue Nation being good this time of year. We normally wait for, November, December, January for that. But at the same time, this is good for college football that you're seeing that. But at the same time, that would be the only thing that I would change in my top 10 as of right now, at least.
Hey, not a. I agree. It's you could easily put those in there. Obviously, Oregon does still have the nice win against Ohio State that continues to look better and better as Ohio State moves up. And just as the Big Ten in general is the first time in the history of the Big Ten or a history of the AP poll that five Big Ten teams are in the top 10.
Yep.
Tremendous work, but keep this in mind. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and Michigan State still have to play one another, so this will change very rapidly. Obviously, 2 weeks from this Saturday is when Ohio State plays Penn State, which will be the last game that they have before the polls come out for the college football playoffs, which will be Tuesday,
Ah,
November 2nd. So Ohio
nice.
State unfortunately only has 2 games since they're on a bye this week to impress the committee. Other teams should have 3 remaining. I don't remember their schedules, but again, if you're a team that still needs to impress the committee, getting a nice ranked win on your resume definitely helps. And let's go ahead and jump to the biggest game this week, which is number 11 Kentucky versus number 1 Georgia.
Yes,
And
sir.
surprisingly, I took a look at this game and did a little deep dive, and the first thing that shocked me is Georgia has a 21 and a half point just advantage here in the spread. What? I I know both teams play very good defense. Obviously, Georgia is probably much better at this point. Both offenses can struggle at times. Stinson Bennett is still the quarterback for Georgia, with JT Daniels still injured, and Kentucky's still not quite overly great, at least on the offensive side of the football, but both defenses are very good. Kentucky's only given up 17 and a half points on average per game, whereas Georgia's given up a slim 5.5 at this point. And I believe there's a stat out there, and I don't remember the exact first number, but I believe Georgia scored either 239 points on the season and only given up 39. I mean, they've only given up 39 points all
Wow.
season long. They have just been dominant. It's just the spread itself is what kind of shocked me in this one. I thought it would be a little bit closer, but the way Georgia's been handling their business against ranked opponents in the last several weeks, against Arkansas and Auburn this past week, it would not shock me if they went out there and dominated yet again. Uh,
Exactly.
Hopefully, this is a much closer game. Maybe something in the range of a 17-13 game, maybe a 13 to 9 game, something real defensively. But Fletch, I see you shaking your head over there. What do you got?
Really quick too, good stat on that. It was 33 points they've given up so far this season. Georgia has. Reason why I mention that is this: the spread against Arkansas, and they were number 8 at the time. The spread was 18. I think Arkansas is probably, I don't know. We don't know who's better between Arkansas and Kentucky at this point. However, Arkansas was to believe at that point a really good football team. They had some really good ranked wins on their schedule with Texas and I believe A&M. Um, I might have that wrong. We'll fact check that here shortly. However, I just don't see anybody that they play for the rest of the season, at least on on their regular season schedule, scoring more than 10 points on Georgia. I'm expecting somewhere along the lines of like 38 to 7, 30-10, 38 to 10. I'm going over on the spread. If I'm a betting man, I do think they win by more than 3 touchdowns. I think they'll win by four touchdowns at least. Um, I just think they're too good, man. And I really truly believe they're head and shoulders. I wouldn't say head and shoulders above everybody else, but I do think that's the best team in football. We saw Alabama's flaws and weaknesses. I don't believe Georgia's offensive flaws are to be worried about, whereas a defensive flaw is to be worried about. Georgia has probably it's 11 guys that play defense. I would not be surprised if 10 of these guys are drafted on within the first two to three rounds. I wouldn't be shocked. This defense is elite. I think Iowa being a number two probably has the second best defense in the country, and I would love to see that in the playoff. But at the same time, right now, I think Georgia will wipe the floor with Auburn, or excuse me, not Auburn. They did that last week. They'll wipe the floor with Kentucky. I think they'll handle business against Florida. And Clark, have you seen Georgia's schedule toward the end of the season?
Yeah, it should be pretty easy going, if I'm not
Cupcake
mistaken.
schedule. There's
Yeah.
one SEC opponent. No, I'm sorry. That's disrespectful to Missouri. There's two SEC. No, I'm kidding. There's two SEC opponents after Florida. It's Missouri and Tennessee, and then after that, they're done. They're actually done with SEC play as of November 13th. November 20th, they play Charleston Southern, and then they play Georgia Tech to finish the year. And who knows? They see an SEC title game. Just we'll see how that goes. I don't see Georgia falling at all to anyone unless it is the SEC title game, and they say run against an Alabama team that's out seeking revenge. This is going to have a lot to say about the college football playoff if Georgia can run the table, but I think they handle business this weekend.
Yeah, and just like you mentioned of how dominant that defense is, when you're playing that well offensively, you just have to run the ball and just
That's
continue
it.
to hold a position. You don't need Stinson Bennett to really throw the ball that much, especially how good that defense is. Uh, so we'll see what happens. Again, a very highly rated game. And I think that's going to be a 3:30 game on CBS over in Sanford Stadium. The only other ranked game this week would be undefeated Oklahoma State at number 12 versus the 25th team in Texas. And again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I've got Oklahoma State winning this game. It's just because Texas had the win in their hands. I think they were celebrating at halftime and they let it slip away. And I don't think that feeling is going to go away this week. I think they're going to just get caught in a trance and get beat at home yet again. Maybe in a similar fashion as well. I know obviously Oklahoma State is not quite the same as Oklahoma. We'll see what happens there with Bedlam a little bit later on. But for right now, I've got Texas losing this game. Are you feeling the same way?
Yeah, I think so. I actually like Texas this year. I think the running back is phenomenal over there. Bijan Robinson. I don't know. I just have a feeling, kind of like you said, it's kind of I don't say a trap game because it's a really good opponent in Oklahoma State. But I just something about Texas, man. It's like mentally they got a little bit of a roadblock to get over. We'll see how they do this weekend. I'll say this: I'm rooting for them to win, but I just don't see it. Just being a realist about it. But I agree with you there.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and finish off with the schedule. Do you see any other games that are potential good games, or maybe even potential trap games for this coming weekend?
Baylor BYU. I think it's going to be a great game. I actually have Baylor winning.
I would agree. I think when I looked at the entire schedule, I think that was the one trap game because
Yeah,
BYU lost last week. I think it kind of caught them by surprise, and Baylor's plays pretty well. This is no gimme game here, and I
and they're at
think
home.
BYU is going to go into Baylor and just kind of struggle there a little bit. I agree with you. I think Baylor's going to pull the upset there. The rest of the way, there's not really too much. Obviously, we see Cincinnati versus UCF. They should be able to handle business at home. We have Iowa playing Purdue. I think that's going to be a great game for them just to get healthy and get right and feel good once again about being the number two team in the nation. Um, but beyond that, hopefully there's some good games this weekend. Uh,
Oh yeah,
but we will keep an eye. And again, if you're the committee, some of these top teams, I know some of them in the social media has talked about, what does Cincinnati need to do in order to make the playoffs, or what does Alabama or Oklahoma. At this point, the committee's looking at Cincinnati and saying, hey, normally you have to do two things. You have to win out, pretty simple, and
facts.
and you have to look good doing it. Because
Yep,
there's only one ranked team left on your resume at this point. I don't even think they're ranked at this point, which would be SMU.
they
Um,
are
they are
23rd.
ranked 23rd, okay? So they could potentially be a little bit higher by the time that happens, but we'll be getting into our playoff rankings before that time comes. As for Oklahoma, I don't know what they got to do. They just got to keep winning at this point. Win the Big 12. It might be enough. They've got it, hopefully. And let's get into them a little bit. I had
So,
mentioned with the quarterback situation, there was a report that when Caleb Williams scored his first touchdown in the second half of that game against Texas, that Spencer Rattler was not overly thrilled for his teammate. And then their reports came out that Spencer Rattler is potentially, I think there was one report that mentioned that he had actually left the team for a hot minute and then was talked back onto the team. But I think there is a good chance that he will jump into the transfer portal either sometime during the season or at the end of the season. Uh, it's unfortunate for someone that was supposed to be uh, the Heisman Trophy frontrunner heading into the season. He was supposed to be very, very good. Yes, he's had some down games, but this was your chance to see that, hey, your competition's right there. You need to step up to the plate and be able to handle it. And he is running away, at least from what I can tell on the reports, which is very unfortunate at this point. But for Oklahoma, Caleb Williams looks absolutely amazing. Maybe we'll see a different
Hmm.
Oklahoma team moving forward if they do go with Caleb Williams moving forward. And again, they need to start. They need to continue to win, but also start looking like a more complete team. They haven't quite put it all together quite yet, except for maybe some would say maybe the second half against Texas is where they really put it together and got the great win on the road. And then for Alabama at this point, number one, you got to win out, and you're going to get in the SEC championship game, and then you got to beat Georgia. It's that simple. And then you should be in as well. But we'll see what happens. Like we mentioned, the Big Ten still has a lot of teams yet to play one another. We still have another 3 weeks before the playoff committee makes their first rankings, and we'll have a much clearer idea of what teams actually have a chance at this point. Um,
Right.
like I mentioned with the committee, it's all about making a statement right here, right now, and showing the committee just how good your team is so they can better understand how to properly rank you. Um, Simple enough. Fletch, anything else before we move on to the NFL?
No, I mean you kind of hit on it, man. The playoff is going to be very interesting when they come out with the rankings here in a few weeks. We'll see what kind of mayhem happens between now and then. Just a couple things I'm looking at, man. The Oklahoma Sooners. I just want to mention this. They is very, and I don't know who's old enough to remember this. I remember this. This is like my first couple years of getting into college football as just a kid. Remember Ohio State's run to the title when they beat Miami?
Mm-hmm.
They squeaked past almost every team. And I remember a game winning touchdown, actually, Chris Gamble, I believe, caught against Purdue with seconds remaining
It was
to win that
Jenkins.
game. Jenkins, I'm sorry. Yes, good point. Um, man, it's feeling like that. Like we know you're a good team, but you flirt with losing every time you get into these close games. You always have to come back. To be honest with you, it makes for I think a seasoned team. I'm not really a big Oklahoma fan. I think they're a little overrated, and that might be why is because they keep struggling with these teams, and who maybe they just can't get out of their own way. It could be just Rattler not really living up to the hype as well. It could also have something to do with that defense being porous as usual. It's interesting. I think if they run it, I'm not saying I think if they run the table, they're making the playoff. I'll say that. But you have wins against Texas. You would also have a win against a right now a 12 ranked Oklahoma State team. By the time you play Baylor, they probably will be ranked. Um, and then you have the Big 12 title game. That's probably going to be against either Oklahoma State, Baylor, or Texas at this point. I'm not ready to write them off yet. So we'll wait and see. We'll just wait and see on these guys. I just want to mention margin of victory in every single game except who is WCU, by the way? Is that Western Carolina? Yep.
Yes.
Outside of Western Carolina, they've won every game by only one score.
Yeah, it's a good point. For years past, definitely was a team like Ohio State, like you mentioned, that kind of had to fight their way every single week, and it was never truly clear. Uh, and I've talked about that in years past with the committee. Unfortunately, with this committee and the way they look at things comparatively to how the BCS worked, um, unfortunately, they don't look at it quite the same way unless there is
Right.
a part of their team like they have a historic defense or a historic offense to where they can really hang their hat on, even though, and we've seen that in the years past with a team that had a historic offense, but their defense was just terrible, but yet they just kept winning games, kind of like what Oklahoma's kind of doing now, in a small little comparison there. But unfortunately, getting by is not really what the committee is typically looking for, but
Right.
we'll see what happens with the Big Ten. Obviously, they're going to beat each other up at some point, so Iowa's going to have to beat one of those four teams that's also ranked. So we'll see what happens there. We don't know if Cincinnati's going to be able to run the table as well. We don't know if Alabama is going to be able to run the table, or if they end up being a two-loss team if they face Georgia in the championship game for the SEC. So there's plenty of opportunities for Oklahoma to get their stuff together and find themselves a spot. Especially, we'll see what kind of team. If Caleb Williams is the actual starting quarterback, I believe they will be a much more complete team. Maybe not defensively, but if they show the committee that they can be super consistent on offense, especially with Caleb Williams now at the helm, yeah, I would totally agree with you that run the table. You got still got Oklahoma State, Bedlam at the end of the year. You're kind of half hoping that Texas starts getting more wins because they're going to soon not be ranked. So that game may not be held up. But if Baylor gets ranked, they could add some flair with this at this point. But we'll see what happens. I
Mm.
would you're going to have their offense get back together because if they continue to have Rattler out there and their offense looks like they did in the first half against the Red River rivalry game, committee's probably not going to view them well just because they don't know how good they could be if they actually put in a better quarterback at this point. So that was a good point. Like I said, we'll after this week we'll have a little bit easier and a little bit better idea of exactly what's going on. Usually do every single week. Let us go ahead and move on to the NFL. Here is the schedule. As you can see it, I chose not to do the Australian version this time. For those who don't like to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning and watch it on 7 Mate TV, um, so you can see the listing here. Tonight's game, you have the Buccaneers versus the Eagles. On Monday night, we have the Bills versus Tennessee.
Yes,
Obviously, each and
indeed.
every single week, we pick six of these games, typically some of the better ones, maybe a couple of the bad ones, and we try to pick the winners each and every single week. So let's go ahead and jump into the pick six. On my side, I've actually screwed up the records. The records are actually 19 and 11 for me. You are 17 and 13. You're still two picks behind at this point. We both went 4 and 2 last week. Um,
Ah,
we're getting there. We're slowly moving on. I like to separate myself a little bit, but you just keep holding on. Um, so let's go ahead and go into these games. First game on the docket, I've actually put all of my picks out there, as you can see it on YouTube. But for the podcast, I will talk about them individually. First game, Broncos Raiders. Obviously, we talked about the Raiders losing their head coach. Their team is kind of in disarray at this point. They started off, I believe it was 3-0, and then lost the last two games. They have struggled quite a bit, and the Broncos got Teddy Bridgewater back, looked much better. Cortland Sutton looked great once again. They will soon to have Jerry Jeudy back, but not this week. This week, I've got the Broncos winning this game. I think the tailspin for the Raiders will continue moving forward. Fletch, who do you got?
the same, and it really for the same reasons. The Broncos are a good team. I think the Raiders are dealing with a lot more than just football right now. For that reason, I'm going to go with the Broncos.
Yeah, can't complain with that pick either. Next game that you picked for us, the 1-4 Dolphins versus the 0-5 Jaguars. This
All the
game is
ball.
over in London, so 9:30 a.m. start time here. Obviously, we have two very bad teams. A defense that was so good last year for the Dolphins, they have not lived up to expectations this season. And then you have the Jaguars that were bad last year. They're bad this year. I think they've lost 20 straight games dating back to last year after winning the first game of the season. They've rattled off 20 straight losses. Their running game has improved. They've allowed James Robinson to just really take care of the offense at this point. But Trevor Lawrence, being a rookie quarterback, continues to have issues here and there. For this one, I like Tua led Dolphins winning this one over in London. Fletch, who do you got?
The time is here, Clark. Trevor Lawrence gets his first win.
Wow, you're calling it. Finally a win.
Yep, the Jags are going to get it done. It's right. It's just right. They've lost a lot of games in a row. We're a week removed from the Urban Meyer saga. Um, I'm sure that that's kind of under the rug with John Gruden now being in the forefront. You're in London. You're not even on American soil. The game's at 9:30 in the morning. The Dolphins are don't look good right now. It's Tua's first game back. I don't know, man. It just feels right. Let's go with the Jags.
And I partially agree with you because the Dolphins' defense is just so bad. But I will say, if the Jaguars can finally win for the first time in 20 straight games, it's because it's technically a home game for them. The owner has been trying to put the Jaguars over in Europe for quite some time. And just a
Yeah.
little side note, the NFL is trying to also get a home game over in Germany
Yep.
as well. It was actually the best place in Europe because back when NFL Europe was actually a thing, Germany was the last place that had some teams playing because it was the most popular sport at the time. So there is a little bit of history
Nice.
there. So we'll see what happens moving forward. Next game on our pick six, we have the Chargers versus the Ravens. The Ravens,
Good game.
a tremendous game in the second half, finally put it together. Lamar Jackson, probably his career best passing wise, 85% completion percentage, helped lead the Ravens back in overtime against the Colts. And as for the Chargers, well, they just in a scoring fest against the Cleveland Browns. Austin Eckler was once carried into the end zone last week, so
Mm.
this should be another high scoring game against these two teams in a shootout. I have the Fighting Herberts winning this one. Who do you got?
That's a good one. It's very tough to pick against Lamar Jackson lately. But I am going to go with the Chargers as you are. I do think the overall both teams are really good. Something about this Chargers passing attack, though, even though I know Lamar played well last week, the Chargers have been doing this since week one. I just think they perform very well, and I think they get it done. I think we get a close one, somewhat of a shootout, high scoring game. I think the Chargers pull it off, though.
Yeah, and we saw last week with the Ravens, they got off to a slow start, even though it was an above average defense against the Colts. But that slow start, you can't do that against a high scoring offense like the Chargers and expect to win. They're going to put up a fight. Lamar Jackson's going to run the football. They got nobody else to run the football, so they're going to continue to
Hmm.
throw. We'll see a much more a growing of his passing ability. But we both have the Chargers moving forward. Next pick, we have the undefeated Arizona Cardinals versus the Cleveland Browns. Like I mentioned, the Cardinals continue to just win games. There is a little bit of a report that Kyler Murray's right shoulder is a little bit dinged up, not enough for him to miss the game, but something to keep an eye on moving forward. As for the Browns, a team that can put up some points, can definitely run the ball. Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb looked phenomenal, even though they did not practice today. So we'll keep that in mind. But I've got the Cardinals staying undefeated. It's just one of those years that this is that one team that just continues to win games, even though maybe some of them you shouldn't. This might be one of those. They're going to Cleveland. They get the win. Fletch, do you agree?
Um, actually, I don't. We're gonna go with the Cleveland Browns on this one. Um, no practice means fresh legs for me. I don't think that I don't. I'm not worried too much about their injuries, but and I understand completely why you picked the Cards. I do think they're playing the best football right now overall. I know last week wasn't like a spectacular performance, but they got the job done. I'm gonna go with the Browns though, man. I mean, I think let me just double check. I want to say, yeah, they're at home. It's 4 o'clock game. Should be a good game though. I'm excited to see this one as well. So yeah, but this time I am gonna go with the Cleveland Browns. I think they get it done this week. I think Baker has a good bounce back week as well.
Agreed. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a higher scoring game, maybe something similar that you saw when they played the Chargers last week.
Right.
So we'll see what happens there. But another game that you can catch up on me if the Browns do happen to win. Our fifth game is the Minnesota Vikings going against the Carolina Panthers. The Vikings have struggled on offense. I think part of it is because Dalvin Cook being out with the bum ankle. All reports he's practiced the past 2 weeks, so he is expected potentially to play unless he has another setback. Alexander Madison has filled in quite nicely there, but they haven't really thrived offensively like we've seen them in the past. They'll be going against the Carolina Panthers that have a very young but very talented defense. And unfortunately, at this point, reports are saying that Christian McCaffrey is only a 50-50 chance of playing on Sunday. Uh, doesn't seem real positive that he will get back this week, but Sam Darnold, even though he had a bad week last week, will potentially try and get back on track this week. But for this one, I've got the Vikings winning on the road. I think it's going to be a very close game, especially if Dalvin Cook is able to play. I think he helps carry the load. Fletch, who do you got?
Yes, sir. I have the Vikings as well. I think it'd be a good game as well. Great point that you mentioned about Carolina's defense. I do think the Vikings offense does enough for them to win. I'm going to go with the Minnesota Vikings on this one.
I like it a lot. And then for our last game, it is the Monday night game. We have the Buffalo Bills going on the road to Tennessee Titans. The
Yep.
Titans defense is just literally in shambles at this point, but good news is their top two receivers are on pace to come back. That's both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. So hopefully the offense can get going and not allow. I mean, they're fine with King Henry running it for 30 plus times a game at this point. He had 3 touchdowns last week. I know that for fantasy purposes, it hurt, and I'm fine. I survived. I mean, I didn't win, but that's what happens when you face King Henry.
True.
As for the Buffalo Bills, their defense is probably the best in the league, if not one of the best. Offensively, they haven't. The scary part is they haven't quite seen to put it together yet from what we saw last season, but maybe they don't have to. Just how good the defense is. For this one, I have the Bills winning this one. Fletch, who do you got?
Yes, sir. I think we're both going to be on the Bills on this one, man. I think they're a hell of a team right now, and they're playing lights out. Tennessee's kind of struggling, dealing with some injuries. I think it's a good game, though. It's a good bounce back game for Tennessee. Nothing against them. I think they'll have a great game, and but I just think the Bills are a little bit too much right now. So I'm gonna go with the Buffalo Bills.
Agreed. And if you want to play along as well, just simply put all your picks in the comments somewhere along the lines, either our social media platforms or in the comment of this video as well, and we will add you to the list. I've actually added 2 or 3 people at this point, so continue to put out your picks. We'll see how well you can do against us. There is plenty of time to catch up. Again, as you can see, our records wise, we're not really setting the world on fire with these picks, but there's still time to catch up. Last but not least, let's go ahead and finish off this podcast with our NFL Top 10 rankings. I will start things off. At number 10, I have the Carolina Panthers at number 10. I know there's a team. I saw your number 10. That's going to be my number 11 team just because I don't believe in their defense. But tell us who your number 10 team is.
Yeah, I got the Titans. I'm kind of like you. I had the Panthers kind of really close, but I got the Titans there at number 10. I think they've started to kind of turn some things around. I think you'll see that team really improve. It kind of sucks their matchup this week, so they may not be here for long, but at the same time, I do think they're starting to right the ship, and you're seeing the Titans of last year slowly but surely. Once they get these guys healthy again and get some more games under their belt, we'll see how that goes. But so I got the Titans here at 10.
And just like you said, if they can get that defense to kind of get turned around, the offensive running game is always there. So they just got to get that defense going, and they will potentially crack the top 10. Moving forward, at my number 9, I have the Cleveland Browns. After losing last week and giving up a ton of points, they have fallen all the way to number 9 for me. At number 9, who you got?
Yes, sir. Who I have here at number 9 is I got the Packers actually. I feel like I had them a little. Yeah, I had them last week at 8. I dropped them down to 9 just with a tough performance. I do think that they probably could have lost that game last week, but it was a good Bengals team and they did play well and they ended up winning the game. So I can't take too much away from them. So I'm going to put them here at number 9.
I like it. Moving on to number 8, I have the Dallas Cowboys, probably one of the more complete teams out there. Travion Diggs is just lighting the world on fire as a rookie at this point, and their offense is so balanced. Uh, well, they could probably be trapeze artists at this point. They are doing some really nice things. Maybe not great for fantasy purposes, but definitely doing some good things on the offensive side of the football. At number 8, who do you got?
Yes, sir. We got the Cleveland Browns at number 8. Actually, they were number 5 for me last week. Took a little bit of a step back with that loss of the Chargers. No knock on them. I just think once you hear who my 5, 6, and 7 are, you probably understand why I had to slide them back. It's just natural, taking a step back, and with the loss that they had this week. So very good game they played. I think they'll be just fine moving forward. But I do have them sliding back to 8.
Agreed. And when you look at the standings themselves, I believe there are four or seven 4-1 teams in the NFL right now. Obviously, with the eighth being the 5-0 Cardinals. So you're going to have some of these teams that are 3-2 that maybe even the 4-1s that maybe should be a little bit higher, but it's kind of hard to put them there just because of how good other teams are. At number 7, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I have moved them up in my rankings. I think they were 10 last week for me. They put on quite a show in that second half. They would be a little bit higher had they actually played a full game instead of just waiting for the second half. At number 7,
True.
who do you got?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I actually have the Dallas Cowboys. They were number 10 last week. They put on a show against the Giants this past week. I mean, they look like a well-oiled machine on offense and defensively. They actually look good, and I'm loving what I'm seeing out that cornerback Diggs there. I mean, I know he's a rookie, but he's looking like the best defensive player in the entire league right now. He's just every game, it's almost you could bet on a pick from him. So we'll see what he has to store next game for us. But overall, the Cowboys have been a really good team. I got him here at 7.
And I saw a very interesting article about him the other day, or actually I think earlier today, that when he went to Alabama, they transitioned him from a wide receiver to a defensive player,
Ah, no
something that
wonder.
he did not want to do, but he called his cousin, some guy named Stephon Diggs, called him, and Stephon Diggs gave him some great life advice of saying, you're good enough to play on defense. Just do it. And lo and behold, again, just like you mentioned, he might be the best defensive player in the NFL right now. So something that definitely worked out for him. At number 6, I have the Green Bay Packers, a team that you're not
Nice.
quite as high on, but being 4-1, you're going to be up towards the top of this list. Obviously, didn't play the greatest game against Cincinnati, but Cincinnati is actually a pretty good team that would probably be my number 12 or 13 team at this point. Uh, who do you have at number 6?
Yeah, I like that pick. I really do. But I have the Chargers at number 6. They've been playing well all season. I believe they're also 4-1, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And they just took down the Browns, which is a hell of a feat right now, as well as the Browns have been playing. Even offensively last week, the Browns had a great game. I mean, I think it was 42 points, so it was a shootout. But there was a little bit of defense involved here and there in spots, and they got both teams got timely stops. A lot of that chaos of the scoring didn't really happen until the fourth quarter. But overall, man, hell of a game. I gotta hand it to the Chargers. They're looking very, very good. Actually, looking like the class of the AFC West, and Herbert's looking like an MVP candidate.
Agreed. And they are playing some very, very good football right now. At number 5, a team that you just mentioned. I agree with all those points. That's why I have them one spot higher. They are playing great
Nice,
football. Yes, defensively they're not quite there yet, but being 4-1 and that offense being a much more complete with the passing game and the running game, and they really don't even need Keenan Allen to really lead the way because Mike Williams finally learned how to fall without injuring himself. He finally did it, and he is looking like the early season MVP, especially for fantasy purposes. I believe he is in full
very
point
true.
PPR, the second overall receiver behind Cooper Kupp. At number 5, who do you got?
We got a great matchup this weekend. I got Ravens at 5, who play the number 6 Chargers at least on my list. So Ravens, I got to give it to these guys. I understand why you have them a little lower because you can't take that long to get it rolling, right? But at the same time, again, Lamar Jackson coming through in the clutch, very tough win, got it done, and here we are again. You got another tough game in front of you, Lamar. I know I picked the Chargers to win this game. Something about them, I think, they can do enough to beat the Ravens. If the Ravens start slow again, I think that might be too much for them. They're not the Colts. The Colts played well that game, but I think if you get behind against the Chargers like that, the Chargers are going to punish you. Right now, I do have the Ravens fifth. Defensively, they've been very good when they needed to be. And then offensively, obviously, you got Lamar Jackson and company. And let's give a little bit of shout out, not so much as to his passing, but also Marquise Brown. Hollywood Brown has been balling this season. I just want to throw him a shout out, and also shout out to Mark Andrews for helping me win my fantasy game this week. That was amazing. especially going against Jonathan Taylor. I didn't see that happen at all. And then the fourth quarter and overtime happened, and yeah, Mark Andrews blessed me this week. However, I got my Ravens here at 5.
Yeah, and he blessed a lot of different fantasy teams this past week with his Monday Night Miracle. There was one story on Fantasy Footballers podcast. They talked about one of their fans saying that they were up 80 points heading into Monday night, and they lost by a single point
Yep.
because the other team had Mark Andrews and I believe Lamar Jackson. So it literally took overtime, a bunch of touchdowns, a bunch of receptions and yardage, but they lost even though they were up 80 points. I cannot imagine that they're playing fantasy football after this year. Uh, but moving on to number 4, I have the Buffalo Bills here. Uh, could be one of the higher teams. I still like them at number 4. I've kept them at number 4. Again, uh, I could easily move them up and down at this point, but I think the 4 teams that I've got ranked here, they're just really, really good. So it's going to have to
Okay.
take quite an effort to actually get into the top 4 or move within the top 4 at this point. But I have a number 4. At number 4, who do you got?
I'm not mad at it. I think we probably had the same 4, just a different order, man. At my number 4 right now, I got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Love them. They look good. I'm just keeping them in the same spot as last week. I don't think there's any change between the top 3 for me from last week to this week. So I'm going to stick with the Bucks here at 4.
And let's go ahead and reveal your top 3. As you mentioned, they did
Yeah.
not change whatsoever, which I'm totally fine with. At number 3, you have the LA Rams. At number 2, you have the undefeated Arizona Cardinals. And at number 1, you have my number 4 overall team, the Buffalo Bills. Um,
Yeah.
any reason that they didn't change, or just hasn't shown anything to really change them at this point?
That I think that's what it is. It's hard though when I get to these 4 teams because like the Browns, okay, they were my 5 last week. They lost, so I literally just slid the Ravens up. Due to the fact that they won. Same thing with the Chargers; they slid up because they won. And sometimes you jump some teams like the Cowboys. They've had a well enough performance. I could have kept them behind the Packers, but just going back to these 4 teams, the reason why I'm kind of torn is the Cards beat the Rams, but I did have the Cards in front of the Rams. Last week, I can't recall who the Cards beat, but nonetheless, all 4 of these teams won and they played well. The
Cards
thing
beat
with
the
the
Niners last week.
Thank you, I was like, I can't remember who they beat last week, but I know they bounced back. Um, yeah, I can't remember who the Cardinals beat. I only beat the Rams 2 weeks ago, so that's the reason why I had them behind the Rams in the first place. And the Rams beat the Bucks. That's the reason why I have these teams in this order. The thing with the Bills, though, they haven't faced any of these teams, but what they've been doing to everybody they've been playing has been much more impressive than anything else I've seen so far this season, at least. So I'm curious to see what they do against better teams, but at the same time, I do think that at this point, there's no stopping Josh Allen, and you're not scoring on that defense. At least for right now. Things can change, but as of today, I just don't see those things happening. So for that reason, that's my 1, 2, and 3. Again, 2 beat 3, 3 beat 4, and one it just looks like number 1 for me right now.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason why I have the Bills at number 4 at this point. Their only loss was the first game of the year against the Steelers, but then they played the Dolphins, the Washington football team, the Texans, and then the Chiefs that has been struggling this year, the 2-3 Chiefs. So
Mhm.
nothing overly impressive at this point. They do play the Titans this week, which could be probably the best run offense that they'll face all season long. So we'll see if that happens. But then the next 3 games after that, Dolphins, Jaguars, Jets, nothing. I mean, they
Nope,
shouldn't
not really.
lose or really give up any points at that time to any of those teams. So, again, unfortunately, just the way that the schedule is panning out for them, there's not really any great competition until maybe you could look at the Buccaneers, which is much later in the season, and then potentially the Panthers the week afterward. But their schedule is weak this year, but
Yes.
besides the Steelers in week 1, they've handled their business and looked great doing it. So we'll see what happens against these lesser teams. If they continue to dominate like they have, and the other teams beating each other up, like we'll see with the Rams versus the Cardinals and the Buccaneers potentially facing off maybe against some tougher teams in the NFC, they may have a chance to move up. As for my top 3, I have the Buccaneers at 3, I have the Rams at 2, and then the undefeated Arizona Cardinals at number 1.
Nice.
My top four unchanged at this point. Only number five is really the only big change at this time. And like I said, just kind of the same points you mentioned. Haven't really done anything to really move around. Um, Obviously, we'll see the Cardinals and the Rams play each other again this year. The Buccaneers will be tested at some point this year. Obviously, the Panthers are still a decent team. The Saints
Yep.
might get better once they have Michael Thomas back. Their defense is still pretty good. But For the Buffalo Bills, they just have to keep winning, and they look dominant. And it wouldn't surprise me if I finally catch up with you that day and put them in the number one spot. But as for now, I
You'll get
need to
there.
see them play someone of contest or of content, something. It was
Yeah.
hopefully it was going to be the Chiefs, but the Chiefs have struggled quite a bit this year. But we'll see what happens moving forward. But that is our top 10 for this week. Fletch, another great show in the books. That was number
You know it.
12. We'll be doing number 13 next week. Anything else before we sign off for the day?
Not at all. But before the next time you see us, we will have a Final Four for baseball in the thick of things. If a sweep doesn't happen, hopefully it doesn't. I hate sweeps. We'll have NBA actually regular season started. And then obviously you'll have another week of college football, another week of NFL football, and a little bit closer to some big fights coming up. So I'm excited, man. Like I said, it's like the eclipse of sports right now. And beautiful time of year.
Exactly, and just like with anything else when it comes to sports in general, the news headlines will always give us something to talk about. As
Every
for
week.
now, that is Fletch. My name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo, and we're out.
Peace.